What is up, theology nerds? This is Tripp, and you're listening to the Homebrewed Christianity podcast, where we bring you the ideological ingredients you need right in your earbuds to brew your own zesty faith. And today on the podcast, you're not going to get one or two or three even voices of theological reflection. You're going to get like a whole bunch, because this is the edited for your listening pleasure live version of the Homebrewed Christianity podcast from Berkeley, California, when I hung out with all my peeps up in Berkeley. That's right. We were hosted by the Church Divinity School of the Pacific, our friends from the Graduate Theological Union, American Baptist Seminary of the West, and the Pacific School of Religion. They combined forces to host and produce and bring me on up there for a live theological podcasting extravaganza. And you may be saying to yourself, well, they all brought you up there. How did they all like hang out in the same place? And that's because they're all neighbors. That's right. One of the coolest parts about Berkeley, if you're thinking about theological education, is that at the Graduate Theological Union, you have tons of different partner schools. Many of them are represented in the podcast. They're sponsoring it, bringing it to you right now. And one of the coolest parts is you'll be able to go and you'll be able to take classes at a school that's kind of nested in your own tradition. Say you're an Anglican, Episcopal, Baptist, you're Lutheran, the UCC, you're Disciples of Christ. They work with a Pacific School of Religion, and so let's say you go, you're able to be in the seminary and stuff from your tradition, but also take classes all the way across the ecclesiastical spectrum, because they're all right there. And not only that, when you hear from Arthur Holder, who is the head of the Graduate Theological Union, which is like, I don't know, the thing they all hang out together in, he'll talk about how it even includes getting to engage and work across religious bounds. So yeah, check it out. There'll be links to all of these schools, the guests, and I just really appreciate them for sponsoring and bringing me out. And you'll hear, we had a good old time. In section 1 of the podcast, I'm going to talk to the other Tripp Hudgins. That's right, Tripp on Tripp action, right here on the podcast. If you thought there's already enough Tripp on the podcast, now you're going to hear Tripp talk to Tripp, which is just something. In section 2, I'm going to talk to Sharon, Valerie, and Scott. That's right, 3 different theologians talking about theology in action in the world, talking about the relationship of church, worship, action. We're going to talk about Black Lives Matter. We're going to talk about Islamophobia. We're going to talk about how you organize for social change and become spiritual change agents. We're going to talk about a whole host of things. Maybe the colonizing invisible force of racism in the church, right in worship. But we're going to touch on a lot of stuff. It's intense. And you're going to say to yourself, how could you quit having that conversation, Tripp? And I'll say, because we had 4 parts and that was just part 2. I promise I'm going to try to have them all back on because I want to finish it too. And then Act 3, Part 3, I talk with 3 heads of seminaries or graduate schools that are part of the GTU. And we get lessons on changes in education, lessons for potential students, and most importantly, some really awesome leadership lessons that they've learned trying to navigate this academy and church divide in a transition and changing time. It was really good, and you'd be amazed that administrators are actually human beings. And last, we finish it off. The other Tripp joins me again, and we host a little game called Au Contraire Mon Frere, where Carol Jacobson, a nice Lutheran who loves the prolepsis, is taking on Jay Johnson, he's just like, your prolepsis can't handle my queer theology that I'm bringing right now. And you may say, queer theology, like, how's that work? He answers it in like 60 seconds, and it was just awesome. So yeah, you should listen all the way through just to get to that. And then when they battle that out au contraire style, it is funny. I mean, hilarious. I mean, awesome. And it's funny, hilarious, and awesome. And that is after some of the more funny and hilarious things that iTunes doesn't approve of were taken out. And like, when you hear it, you're going to say like, a whole new reason to go to Divinity School is just so I could hang out with Jay and Carol. And if you're at the GTU, you can take classes with both of them and even be at a school that neither one of them even work at. So that's how crazy it is. There you go. That was Tripp's pitch. That's me saying, when you listen to it, just think, I could take it across the campus. They sponsor the podcast, coming to you free because of that. Word up. Now, before we jump into the podcast, I want to just say thank you again to all the people who have joined the Homebrewed Christianity community. Those are the people that donate every month. We got acolytes, deacons, we got bishops, we got elders, and I might get to see some of you out in Dallas, Texas. That's right. Next week, Progressive Youth Ministry. And on the 17th, I'll be doing a Theology Nerd Boot Camp. It's a one-day straight-up nerdy spectacular at Perkins School of Theology with my friend Jorg Rieger. We're going to be talking about Jesus. Then the next day, on Thursday, on the 18th, we're going to be doing a live podcast at Sue Ellen's in Dallas, Texas. It's part of the Progressive Youth Ministry Conference, but it's off campus for the live podcast. So if you're in Dallas, you can join. Go to homebrewedchristianity.com and you can find out details. So you can come on out, because not just Jorg Rieger is going to be there, not just Tony Jones is going to be there, Catherine Kettler is going to be there, Paul Wallace is going to be there, scientists, that's right. And this is the Misto Cosmic Justy Fest edition of the live Homebrewed Christianity podcast. Reverend Yolanda is going to do some music. We got some other musical guests. It's going to be happening, popping, and bopping right there in Dallas. You don't want to miss it. And then first week of March, Enfolding Theology here in Redondo Beach, California. I talked to Cynthia Rixby yesterday, and we were talking like how she's going to bring her Bardian feminist heat. And then like right before that, I talked to Amy Shung, who's just like, you got to check my renewal junk, son. He didn't say it like that. That is me inserting completely words into the energy and excitement I had when talking to him. But nonetheless, you get the idea. I was doing that. Then I got this email from Keith Ward, and Keith Ward's like, I'm doing session 1. You know what the question I'm tackling is? It's like, why am I not an atheist? And here's why it matters. He's like, I got that. I argue with Richard Dawkins all the time. You can't handle this heat. He didn't say that either because he's from Oxford. It was an accent, but he was excited. And then I was like, oh, what happens when Tom Ward gets up there and he wants to talk about the problem of evil? I bet you know because you've listened to the podcast. And then Adam Clark is like, I'm going to talk about the good news as it's shaped by black theology. How does black theology understand the good news for our world today? He's like, I'm going to bring the ruckus. He didn't say that either, but I'm just trying to promote this junk, trying to bring the heat. I'm like the theological Don King right here, trying to build up the fight, the future golden boy of promotions. That's another boxing reference. They're not actually going to fight at the thing, but they're going to talk about theology and God and stuff. FollowingTheology.com, you can check out the details, because here's the reason why. The whole stinking thing's going to be live streamed, and you can sign up and watch all the sessions. You can attend this event online for frizzy and get to see a constructive, interactive theology workshop. That's right. First week of March, FollowingTheology.com. Go there, check it out. Boom, shakalaka. And if you want to come out to Los Angeles, you should come, because you could do all that, but you won't get to go beer tasting in the South Bay with Jack Caputo and Peter Rollins and I if you don't come out in person. Just saying. All right. Here's the live podcast. Don't forget, if you're a member of the Homebrew community, we're going to be talking about Plato's Republic with Philip Clayton coming up next week. Alrighty. Here's the podcast. We're into it now. It's a live one. It's awesome. Thank you all my peeps up at Berkeley. Hello, everybody. My name's Tripp. This is a podcast. How many people have ever listened to a podcast before? All right. How many people have listened to one that's not made by NPR? See, that was eliminate half. All right. So the Homebrewed Christianity podcast has been going for a while, and it came out of a little activity I did when I was in seminary at Wake Forest University's Divinity School, facilitated by a small group by the Episcopal professor on staff, namely, sacramental learning of homebrewing. And back then I realized that there are multiple types of beer. There's like the beer that you are indoctrinated into in your fraternity while hanging upside down. And that with large amounts of that spirit, you may be filled with the Spirit and make poor life decisions. But it also tastes kind of useless, has no flavor, and in 1906 it won a blue ribbon. And so hipsters think that it's good. But oddly enough, theology and Christianity is a bit like that. Really light, tasting. You need large amounts of it for it to do anything positive for you, namely vomit in the street and make bad decisions. Christianity is extremely popular. And there's a little craft beer revolution going on where people found out that beer could actually have like flavor. It could be artisanal, because that's fun to say. You can charge twice as much. And there's a group of people rediscovering the art that the monks perfected. And so we decided we were going to, in Divinity School, learn how to homebrew, brew these old styles. Like, we tried doing a Lent fast on like the monk beer you drink when you beer fast, and it's a poor decision. Like 3 of the reasons I can't share with you, and the one I can, I'm not going to. So you can ask me after. So the podcast had this idea, and I'm Baptist, and we're very free church, so we don't like to think for anyone. We like to think with you, and then maybe it just doesn't suck. So if I give you ingredients by interviewing some of the best theologians and philosophers and thinkers, then you can listen to it, brew your own faith, and I only have like one absolute rule for theology. And I say absolute loosely with a bit of postmodern irony. God should at least be as nice as Jesus. It's really cool, except that, the God who is love having people in eternal conscious torment is trendy. So I'm against it. Other things I have feelings about, but all right, so tonight what we're going to do is something that normally never happens on the podcast, like have multiple people talk together at the same time in 25-minute increments. The reason that's difficult is my questions are usually 5 minutes and there are more statements. And it's usually digging into a book. It gets used with lots of discussion groups where, theoretically everyone would go read Crucified God by Jürgen Moltmann, at your church, because they would at least buy it and underline something. But they could listen to like an hour and a half conversation with him about the book. Then you show up, you have a discussion, and it's higher quality. That was how the whole thing got started when I was working at First Christian in Winston-Salem, and it's been going ever since. So another thing to remember about a podcast is it's going to be recorded. So if you have to go to the bathroom or get refills, or like make snarky comments about your professors on Twitter while it's happening and miss part of the brilliance, you can relive it later. Right? So you only have to pretend to pay attention. And like occasionally be like, yeah! Or, amazing, Dean. I love that. And scholarships. So you can do it however you want. So just know, like everyone here, you'll get an email and it'll say like, here's the edited version with all the jokes that the administrators wanted cut out. And you'll be able to share it with your friends or your friends that are thinking about Div School, like, listen to my professor. They were really funny. Or you can send it to your mom because she's like, you went out drinking. You're like, yes, but we talked about Jesus. Oh, great. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of how it works. Normally it's in a bar, so it's like twice as loud when this happens. So y'all are like super respectful. And first off, what we're going to do is, because like, what's the cosmic coincidence of 2 people named Tripp with 2 P's being in the same place at the same time? Yeah, you know what I mean? And I said to myself, if there are 2 Tripps in the same room, and I have like an ontological judgment of Tripps with 1 P. Yeah. That's what can I get a witness? Yeah. I mean, like, I'm not into Lacan, but I do appropriate the lack for Tripps with 1 P. And the 4 of you that laughed, I appreciate it. All right. Put your hands together and welcome Tripp Hudgins.
What is this problem with the lack of the second P? I really don't know where that comes from.
Dude, your voice sounded like double deep.
Yeah,
Can you say, hi, this is Tripp, but not that Tripp, and you're listening to Homebrewed Christianity?
Hi, this is Tripp, but not that Tripp, and you're listening to Homebrewed Christianity.
I I know you're supposed to be in charge of this segment because we're talking about my book, but I'm derailing it before you begin.
Yeah, so you have to stop.
So 2 weeks ago, I got to interview Morgan
I'm older
Freeman.
than you.
And like, if you're talking to Morgan Freeman, the only thing I was trying to do is to get him to say my name. And I'm interviewing him about, he has a series with National Geographic coming out in a couple months called The Story of God. Yours truly's doing the companion podcast for National Geographic with it. And
good job, man.
And like at the end, he's like, I really like your questions. And then I was like, you played God. And he said, I don't think I've ever met a homebrewed Christian before. And I was like, I'm going to edit that. It's going to be in our intros.
Yeah, from now on.
Anyway, it's good to see you, Tripp.
It's good to see you. So it's fun to be up here talking to Tripp about Tripp and Tripp's book. This has been the most surreal experience to read a book by a guy named Tripp who signs everything in the book. You know, when you have the introduction, this is, thank you, all the acknowledgments, and as opposed to signing off with Tripp Fuller, a place and a date, it just says, Tripp. And then I pause. Was I drinking? No.
You weren't.
Was it 3 a.m. with the baby?
That could happen.
That could happen. But no, it wasn't that. It was someone else named Tripp writing the book. And even though he's like 15 years younger than me, it's like I've been tracking you, man. I've been in his shadow ever since. It's been awesome. And this, Jesus, Lord, Liar, Lunatic Are Awesome by Tripp Fuller is a great book when you're thinking to yourself, gee, I've got that first parish, my first gig, and I'm responsible for adult education, and I don't know what book to use this book.
Ooh.
Yeah. See,
that's what I'm talking about.
That's what I'm talking. I know it is because you said it like on page 48. Please make sure.
It's yeah. Well, that I'm not even going to have to like push selling it hard.
No. You go. Seriously, this is a great.
You know, when you get that text from Fortress, don't forget to tell them you're selling the book.
It's already done.
I know, but I'm still going to tell them.
I know. You got it. Fortress Press. And there are lots of reasons to do this. One of the reasons why, and this is something I've experienced in ministry, and I know others have as well. There are a lot of people making a journey. And they're making a journey from a way of thinking about Jesus that might be small to a way of thinking about Jesus that might be larger. And that happens in lots of different ways, from lots of different starting points to lots of different sort of end points, if you will. But this expansion of how we think about Jesus, and that's what Tripp's book is actually all about, how we think about Jesus. Christology. How do we make theology with the story of Jesus, who Jesus was and who we claim Jesus was and is? And it's a fantastic, fun, humorous romp through...
I like romp.
Yeah, romp's a good word.
A Christological romp.
It is a Christological romp.
That would like double attendance at the lock-in.
Christological romp 2016. Bring your kids. Yeah, that's not going to
Romping for Jesus all night long.
That hurts.
Sardine.
We're not playing sardines tonight. Who said aw? Who
Never
was that?
have I.
All right. So a couple things I wanted to talk about because we have 25 minutes. I think we just spent 20 of them talking about, being tripped. Yeah, that was good.
It's exaggeration.
So let's just talk about the series. Because this is the first of a series.
It is.
So talk to me about the genesis of the series and what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, so Fortress came to me and were like, we want to do a homebrewed Christianity book series. What would you want to do? And I was like, can they be guidebooks with like super snarky, slightly inappropriate, edgy jokes around super nerdy introductory text? And they're like, what do you mean? And I was like a book that goes about Jesus, and it's like Kierkegaard, subjectivity, postmodernity, Jesus is a Jew, Eureka, it's probably a good idea, historical Jesus, development of Christology, Anselm, because who doesn't want to write a chapter about Anselm? And then you do the like you're telling like, why was a church wrestling with Jesus? But then you put fart jokes in it. And then people are like, oh, that's awesome. And it all sets up to a cosmo-ecological justice Jesus with John Sobrino and John Cobb and Elizabeth Johnson at the end.
So you wanted something obvious for the reader.
Yeah. I was just like, my whole goal was that the church actually has some really awesome thinking. and we're like the world's worst distributors.
Yeah.
It would be like you have like one really good beer on the tap that no one can see and just turd juice all across the bar. And you're like, would you like this? It's called penal substitutionary atonement. It tastes wonderful. Maybe. And then over there, you have like Moltmann's crucified God in there. Don't drink it. If you read it in German, there are lots of verbs at the end of the sentence. It's just, and he probably believes in climate change.
Right.
And he's German.
Yeah. You can't do that.
They hate us for our freedom and liberty.
Those poor Germans stuck in darkness.
But no, so the series and I wanted it the size of a bird guide.
Right.
Like
no,
literally so it could go in your pocket. And then, there's one for, Hebrew scriptures, New Testament church history, which is flaming heretics and heavy drinkers. Bill Leonard, the Baptist church historian's doing it.
Bill Leonard is writing a book for your series?
Yeah. Coming out
wait a second. Hold on. Stop. Does anyone in this room know who Bill Leonard is?
The Baptist.
All right. There are 4 Baptists in the room.
Dude.
And
that's what I'm talking about. He is hilarious.
Yeah, he is. He's really funny. You all need to get to know Bill Leonard.
He is 90 pounds of stand-up church history comedy. And everyone that knew him giggles. Grace G. Sun Kim's book on the Holy Spirit's coming out next, and Jeffrey Pugh's book on eschatology. And he's not a Zionist at the end, but there is a chart.
Okay.
I know. I was like, I need a chart. How can you have an eschatology book about surviving the end times if you don't explain Daniel 7? For real.
With a chart. Is this like a Venn diagram chart, or is this a pie chart?
Yeah, but it didn't have Russia on it. I was real disappointed.
1980s Cold War philosophy and Daniel.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
you're like,
right.
Daniel 7. It's the key that unlocks everything.
That's the only way to go. See, this is what I read every morning at first thing.
But so all the books, they're kind of introductory. They're funny and they're easy to read. And, I
really like this one. There are several characters. We were talking about the snarky comments. There are 4 characters.
Yes.
That you use. So there's the elder, the acolyte, the deacon, and the bishop.
Correct.
And these are 4 little characters that make appearances and offer their bits of wisdom. So the acolyte is the youth person, right? The kid, the really smart, astute kid that's in your youth group. And the deacon is...
Well, so the podcast has been responsible converting large numbers of evangelicals to like social justice-y, reflective, don't hate everyone that's not like you Christianity.
See, that's crazy.
Well, I feel like I'm like Lawrence Fishburne in The Matrix. I'm not nearly as cool, obviously.
No, that's what I'm saying.
But I did get to talk to Morgan Freeman once. And he's like the coolest person I'd ever met.
Yeah.
Like he has an earring. And he was just like, yeah, dude. Like that.
Really?
With his voice. But,
all right. Anyway.
But the character, because of that, I get the craziest emails from people that finally had the breakthrough. If they're like in flyover country, Southern Baptists or their liberal edgy friends. And then they listen to the podcast on the DL and then they send you this email and they're just amazing where they're like, I never thought that God might not want to send 80% of the people ever made into hell. The way you were talking about the kingdom of God, and you didn't even use the G, you dropped the G because you wanted to get rid of patriarchy and hierarchy, but you made that joke, get rid of the cock and the crown. That was funny. And then I was thinking about it and Jesus is really wanting to change things and make a difference in the world. And I do too. So that's really cool, dude. And I get that email and then you reply back. So that guy is mostly stuff of people that have emailed me.
Really? These are quotations from people that you've...
Yeah,
that's awesome.
There's one of it that when you're talking about atonement theories and those really bad ones that a guy said, no, dude, I was really into that blood of Jesus washed over you thing. My youth group went and handed out tracts outside of a Kill Bill movie. And if you've ever seen Kill Bill... Yeah, all you need to do is throw some Anselm on that. You were like, the passion, that's only half the blood you need. You need Quentin Tarantino on that junk.
That's right. Quentin Tarantino has done some excellent theological work for us, I think. This is true. So you have these 4 characters that sort of offer these quips of wisdom and humor along the way. But you also tell really fun stories. And there was one story that we had talked about earlier this evening that I wanted to hold up. You were in a coffee shop working on something, working on the book.
Yep.
And this guy approached you and asked you what you were working on. And you had a really interesting conversation about asking Jesus into your heart. And then this is another question. Who here has asked Jesus into their heart? Yeah, it's okay. Don't be ashamed.
Would you feel more comfortable if we asked you to close your eyes and bow your head? All right. What's up, Rick? That's what I'm talking about.
Brother Mixon's in the house.
Yeah.
So tell the story. I want you to tell the story.
But
or do you want to or you want to do the thing we talked about?
Yes. Right. So, I mean, so I did a whole bunch of book talks about it, and different ones I'd read different stories, but I never had Tripp read to Tripp a Tripp story by Tripp.
So where do you want me to start? When he finished sharing?
What?
When he finished sharing? Do you want me to do voices?
Yes, you need to do voices. Right. When you have a book with characters and stories, I will do voices. Unless you want me to read one of the characters' voice.
Dr. Myers, with my dissertation work, am I allowed to involve characters and use little voices? No. Okay.
See? That is a real straightforward answer.
I will tell you candidly that if you want a straightforward answer, you go to Dr. Myers. And it's always good. This is true. Oh, see? I'm not even taking a class with you. I get no points for that whatsoever. I know you're not even on my committee. Why am I asking you?
Well, sometimes you just do things for the love of it.
This is true. I need to know what you think about my work. We'll talk about that later. Anyway. So what I was thinking, I'll have a narrator's voice. I'll have the character voice because you're talking to this guy.
Yeah, we're going to assess your ability to dramatically read this.
We'll see how this, and then we'll have your voice because you're quoted in here.
Yeah.
You quote yourself, which is,
Use that deeper, raspy voice.
For you?
Yeah.
Yeah, not going to happen. When he finished sharing, I told him how grateful I was for his vulnerability. He asked if I would pray for him, and I agreed. Then he said, dude, what are you going to pray for? This is Southern California, by the way. I'm trying to be authentic.
Yeah, it's at the coffee shop by the beach.
Yeah, then
I always write books when the surfers are smoking up after the morning surf.
Oh, dude, yeah.
Because they're the best thing for sermon illustrations you've ever got.
And then that's where this question came from.
And they are totally ready to sit and listen about Jesus.
Yeah. They're totally ready to sit and listen or sit. All right. Gnarly. I didn't exactly know, so I paused. Then he said something that was so awesome. I told him that it was going to have to be in the book. He said, dude, when you pray, tell God that my heart needs to grow. I want one big enough to care about the world, be honest about my struggles, and still have, JC around. Maybe God could rock my heart like the Grinch's.
I didn't laugh at him then.
No, but that's maybe God could rock my heart like the Grinch's. That's going to stay with me. I'm going to get that tattooed on something. A week or so later, we saw each other again, and I asked how his heart growth was going. He said, I might just have to get myself a Bible and find a church again. I've got a bunch of questions. It's really weird, but I think the issue for some Christians, dude, if they grew up like me, is they think you only have to ask Jesus into your heart and then he's there keeping everything else out. What if what Jesus really wants to grow is your heart so more and more can get in? I smiled and said, thank you, Reverend, for my next Christmas sermon. How the Grinch did Christmas. I've been trying to figure out a way to describe my own ongoing relationship with Jesus. When I think back to all the different images and understandings of Jesus I've had, and probably defended with gusto, I recognize that we all need room in our hearts for the Jesuses we have encountered and will continue to encounter in various forms. The end. It's like a choose-your-own-adventure book. If you want your heart to grow, turn to page 48.
If you want it to break and cry.
If you want to crucify it on the cross of the Lord, turn to 765. That's Moltmann, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
That's in a chapter called Turning Jesus Down.
Right.
And, there's a few stories in it, but it's built around kind of introducing to people voices around Christological reflection that they would probably not normally encounter, like John Sobrino and Elizabeth Johnson. And one of the things I've always found difficult for progressive Christians, especially if you grew up evangelical, is wherever you happen to be after you're no longer an ignoramus, you think is like the pinnacle of all existence. And then you start to have disdain for people that thought the same way you did 6 months ago. Like, I remember my first month not as a Calvinist. Like, I mean, dude, I like straight up read Charles Spurgeon sermons for devotionals, Calvinist. Like, all 5 points in bold, son. I sniffed tulips all day long. Yeah, that's right. Could you imagine, like, if someone, like, did not know any of that, and they're like, is he saying he carries around tulips? Yeah. But I remember, like, all of a sudden, when, you know, God graced me with reading Charles Hartshorne's Omnipotence and Other Theological Mistakes, I realized that Calvin thought God was just a complete asshole, and everyone that agreed with him was one too, and should agree with me. And I was like that most annoying philosophy student who was like 20, and it was like, I remember my first book. And I just showed up at my all white straight man Bible study with Calvinist. Now, when you had no 4-pointers in this junk, this is Baptist Calvinism. Yeah, we don't. Presbyterians, they like started wussing out. They count Schleiermacher as Reformed. And like, I remember, like, I had like all this disdain for like the version of Tripp a month ago. And then I read Pannenberg, and I was like, oh no, this is real. All you people that don't even understand the ontological priority of the future. I can't even believe you're a Christian. Right? And then I took a social gospel seminar and read Walter Rauschenbusch, and I was just like, screw capitalism. If you like capitalism, you're of the devil. Hashtag feel the burn. Hashtag I love Jews that are angry about capitalism. Hashtag read the freaking Bible, Rubio. You know, like, and you're just like, screw you, dude. You can't be in the body of Christ. You would probably kill Jesus. Yeah. And I, like, part of the growing thing for me is realizing you should have a big enough vision of the church that at least each version of you is in it. and I grew up as a Southern Baptist church planter's kid who was a Calvinist. So like, I can't even kick Mark Driscoll out. So the whole goal of that chapter is basically like the ways you have completely like kind of turned Jesus down repeatedly. Then you have breakthroughs, grow, and have space. And if you get them to tear up, then John Sobrino goes down better.
Right. No, this is true. I mean, this is one of the things I really like about the book, because you provide a lot of history. You provide a lot of your own autobiography. So this is your own biography. So this is exciting stuff, like you do when you toss Sobrino into the flames of your own Christology. There's a lot of really neat stuff that happens when do you make room in your heart for someone else's notion of liberation, right? That's a challenging way to grow. Now, this takes me to a more important point. How are we doing for time?
We're right where the Lord has ordained us to be.
Amen. Amen.
We got like 5 minutes or so.
Okay. So then we got like no time to talk about this, because this is important. So one of the things that I'm studying here at the Graduate Theological Union and at California Berkeley, for those of you who are considering PhD work, please recognize that you can cross-register quite liberally to the University of California, Berkeley. I would encourage you to apply especially to the liturgical studies program at the Graduate Theological Union.
That's what I'm talking. That was better than your pitch for my book.
Yeah, I know, it's because it's better. Never mind.
Yeah, but it's only like $17. And
so we're missing a few zeros.
And if you get the book tonight back there, then make sure you give me your email address, and then I'm going to mail you 5 online audio classes. Philip Clayton and I's Introduction to Religion and Science, Peter Rollins and I's Atheism for Lent, the online Christology seminar, and
that's 4. You have 2 more.
Paul, Philosopher's Interpretations of Paul class, and Postmodern Varieties of Theology. So that's like $200 and some worth of my online classes just to buy the book, so my book sales are good.
Yeah.
You know, hashtag Marxist sad. Hashtag I'm still begging.
Hashtag GTU scholarships, please.
I know. I'm just trying to avoid vocational slavery.
Yeah, I know.
Student
Is Arthur
loans,
still in the room?
Killing
Arthur,
the
you still
church's
here?
conscience.
Yeah, Arthur's still here. So you hearing these numbers? I'm just wanted to, hold that up. So here's the thing. So early in the book, you talk about the various debates that you and your college roommate. Is this the same guy throughout the book? Did you have the same college roommate? Did he love you that much? Did he stayed with you through all of this? I was a freshman Calvinist, crazy,
yeah.
And then by senior year, you're like,
Yeah, I saw him last week, and he had read the book.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, dude, you were way worse than you made yourself sound." And in almost all the stories, like he's the hero.
Yeah.
And it was funny. We were at, like in high school, when you're a senior, they invent all sorts of social events for you because you're a senior. So clearly you should finally get to enjoy your friends and not just do work all the time. And we had like a kickoff senior year, lock-in at school. Cause what's better than 18-year-olds in a lock-in at school?
Yeah.
And, because I was like always down to out Jesus people, I brought my Bible and a copy of Cost of Discipleship to do my quiet time. And he was FCA leader. And so he was pretending that he was going to do one so he didn't get out Jesus. And then I was like, yeah, you may have read the Sermon on the Mount, but have you read this? And he's like, I've been meaning to read that. And I was like, good, let's have lunch every Tuesday and read it. He had never read the Bible before and didn't know who Dietrich Bonhoeffer was. He just wasn't getting out Jesus. And then I wasn't really going to read the book. I just had it to like look cool. Because in the South, you can carry around extra religious books and look cool.
This is true.
Yeah. You want to like woo in those Bible thumping ladies.
Bonhoeffer.
Yeah. You're like
hot.
Uh-huh.
You laugh. Uh-huh. Because you're in Northern California, but this is true. The only place
story.
where Bonhoeffer is hotter than like in Decatur, Georgia is in Wheaton, Illinois. And Jay Johnson will be talking about how hot Bonhoeffer is in Wheaton shortly.
I had a joke I'm passing on, but anyway, he backed into being like taking it seriously, and we were out trying to out Jesus each other by doing all the crap in it, and then we both like became real quick Christians without knowing each of us were trying to fake the other one, and then we went to college together and were religion majors and roommates till I got married, and we were each other's best men, and
yeah, that's really nice.
It's just really sweet.
So back to me. I'm studying ethnomusicology. It's my one of my fields. That's my.
I like music.
Yeah, I like it. It is. I like music a lot. Like a lot. So there's
who likes music?
All right. So
only at a divinity school do you get such a tame response to music.
Like
who likes
7
the
of you.
phenomenology of spirit? Yeah.
All right. So here, I just want to hear this, and this is going to settle some things very quickly. But I just need to know because my world has come undone reading this book. Is it Guns N' Roses or is it Stryper?
I mean, it's a tough decision.
Guns N' Roses? Stryper?
Oh, yeah.
No. All right, like 3 people like this is, boy, we are in a divinity school in Berkeley. I'm sorry, Guns N' Roses? Is that like old music?
I'm thinking about the night train.
Welcome to the jungle. We've got fun and games.
Welcome to the jungle. We got fun and games.
So you do that now.
They're reuniting it.
They are. No, they're on tour. It's awesome. I can't wait. The psychological meltdowns with the flames and everything. And it's going to be fantastic.
And if the lights aren't too bright, you may not notice how old they are.
Yeah, I think it's the spandex, and this is why I want to go to Stryper. Yellow spandex. We ran out of yellow spandex in the 80s and early 90s because of Stryper.
Look,
and in this argument you had with your college roommate who loved you so much because of Bonhoeffer, you said in the book that you were convicted by the strength of his argument. No. You wrote the book. You don't need it as a reference. You were convicted by the strength of his argument that Guns N' Roses was the better band than Stryper, but you do so in protest.
Well,
and I am so horrifically disappointed that that's where you started the book. It left a sour taste, and I had to get all the way to New Jesus in My Heart to get over the fact that you think Stryper is better than Guns N' Roses?
Now, well, maybe everyone doesn't even understand the brilliance of the Bible-thumping bumblebees. But in the beginning of the book, I say, like, my roommate and I, we came up with the postmodern version of casting lots. Like, that's how they picked the replacement for Judas. So we were like, instead of lots, we'll play a game of Madden 001 and settle our religious conflicts that way. And the Holy Spirit would lead to victory, the correct answer. Like, you know, are libertarian Calvinists with goatees the single most annoying version of a human being alive? Yes. Like, there was a number of them. And one of them was like GNR versus Stryper. And the Holy Spirit was sick that day. And so Guns N' Roses was the winner.
You need to heed the discernment of the Lord.
No, but you don't understand. Stryper was amazing. Like, the appropriate way to experience Stryper is like, do you remember Heidegger's reflection on the painting of Van Gogh's boot? Amen. Like, you don't look at it namely as a painting on top of a canvas. No. You don't look at it as a tool. You look at it as something that calls forth. And what better way to call forth than in poetic renderings about how you wish the devil would go to hell? I'm just saying. Are you Satan's friend?
You're hurting me. I'm not going to answer that question.
He's saying, what I have in mind is to turn from the devil. He's a liar and a thief. That's in the freaking Bible. Do you hear Guns N' Roses quoting the Bible?
You know you're a sinner in the hands of an angry God, right?
Well, do you know where the devil goes? Because I don't want to go with him.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I'm pretty sure that like if you were just to like reflect on that for a while, it would call forth something out of you.
Yeah, I'm sure it would. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Tripp Fuller. Get his book. Thank you, sir.
All right, but who are we inviting up next? So you can clap at the same time.
We have
Sharon, Valerie, and Scott.
Yeah, so Scott's coming on up. Scott MacDougall, come hither. Sharon Fennema, come hither. Valerie Miles Tribble, come hither. Ladies and gentlemen, we got CDSP, PSR, and ABSW in the house.
Now, don't forget, it's your job to have gotten refills and used the restroom, because at the end, we're going to have groups singing. Like, nothing brings people together at seminary like group karaoke of mid-90s alt-rock songs. So when we went to whatever the meal is between lunch and dinner, and he's like, I want to argue with you about Stryper, I was like, that's dangerous. So that song, To All the Devil, my mom is so loving that I used to only know the words to the chorus and sing it out in restaurants randomly. And so she has multiple stories. It was that song and Cat Scratch Fever, where the two like little 7-year-old Tripp learned the words from, and she's like, I can't believe your dad let you listen to that. I'm like, you don't like cats? Middle of nowhere, North Carolina. To hell! What is he doing? That was when metal was of the devil. All right, so get close, and we're going to check. The closer you are, the better people on the internet that are participating will hear, and the less total editing I have to do later. So, what you're going to do is you're going to name your name, your school, your position, and the last movie that made you tear up one. And clearly we're going to start with Scott because he looks so confident, people listening to this podcast, that he knows the correct answer. But first, Scott, you're going to turn the on button on your microphone.
How's that?
Say more.
Say more. All right. I'm Scott. Ready?
Yeah.
I'm Scott MacDougall. I'm the visiting assistant professor of theology here at the Church Divinity School of the Pacific. Thank you. And the last movie that made me cry, was a documentary about raising lion cubs in Africa. It's the best I got.
The best. Honestly, like Simba's proud. Sharon.
Hi, I'm Sharon Fennema. I'm assistant professor of worship, director of worship life at Pacific School of Religion, where I also direct the certificate in sexuality and religion program there. And the last movie that made me cry was, I think, this is a little pathetic, Finding Nemo. Which I rewatched over the holidays, like you do.
That's completely legitimate. I've cried at Finding Nemo. Like when your kids have ear infections and you stay up late at night and that's the only thing that'll make them go back to sleep, all of a sudden, like random parts of Disney movies make you cry. Like the end of Cars. You know, like when the king wrecks and Lightning's like, I don't want to win. And he goes, pushes the old car across the thing. And he's like, didn't you want to win? And Lightning's like, no, the cup is just an empty cup without my friends. And I just start crying. I love Friends. And I'm glad we're all friends.
Me too, Tripp. Me too.
What part of Finding Nemo really, pulled that tear out?
It's the part where they think he's dead.
Oh.
That's real sad.
Yeah. And it is. Well, Valerie.
I'm Valerie Miles Tribble. I'm with the American Baptist Seminary of the West. I am assistant professor of ministerial leadership and practical theology. And the last movie, I don't get to see movies too often, but I think the last movie that made me cry was The Help.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was a good one. Have you read the book? Mm-hmm. At the last church I worked at, they had a reading group, and I mentioned it because if you're in Los Angeles, you have to mention the most recent movie to come out to show how cool you are. And so the week it came out, I used it in the sermon, and then we have 3 reading groups, 60-year-olds, 70 to 80-year-olds, and you go to the retirement home one, and they were all reading The Help. And I got invited to all 3 of them. I'd never read the book. I'd just seen the movie and mentioned in the sermon. But you never turn down old people reading groups. The food is awesome. And then they start telling you stories. And it's just, that will make you cry almost as much as Cars. The follow-up just wasn't as good. You take Mater bringing people together for friendship and then throw on a British Spy 007 car and you're like, whatever. Then they were planes. Sharon, you have a book, Practicing Piety, The Colonizing Force of Invisible Whiteness in Christian Worship. What's that about? It's one of those titles that's just real dangerous to be presumptive about, or you could get fired. So,
what's it about? It's about looking at the ways in which whiteness functions invisibly in most of our worshiping contexts as the sort of normative that we measure everything else against. So the idea that it is in its invisibility actually functioning to reinstate white supremacy with every time that we put white clause on the table because it's a holy day. So all the sort of symbolism that comes with whiteness, all of the language that we use around whiteness and purity, all those pieces that are sort of undercurrents in worship that tell us something about what we think about whiteness.
Mm-hmm. When students first hear that, I could imagine where you grew up, that very title feels different. Like having taught theology classes in the South and in Southern California, that will be heard so different. And I hadn't even thought about it because I've been in California for 8 years and then went and I was speaking in Missouri. And then from there, I was going up to Arkansas to speak. And I had the minister at the church I was speaking at in Arkansas came to the event I was at. We were driving up. I hadn't thought about the Southern heritage of the Fuller family. Like, and like we fill up the Dixie cup of just Southernness. Like when my son got into history and he started reading history books, one of those uncles you blocked on Facebook mailed him a children's book about the Civil War annotated. Not annotated with edifying remarks, but just like horrible mythology that you hear growing up as a Southerner. And I'm like pulling Post-it notes out before I give it to him. And like, that was the only thing that had brought up my Southern experience since I'd moved to California. So I'm driving up and I realize in the pastor's car, who I'm going to preach at a large charismatic church that is white is the minority of the congregation. And I'm driving past a huge stretch of land the Fuller family used to own as plantations. I was not expecting it. Hadn't thought about it and started crying. And like, it's something I care about, went through racism training. I know it lingers. And yet I was so unaware and that one symbol brought it back. But if I hadn't rejected that notion that white supremacy lays so deep in the American religious story and wrestled with it by friends that were really gracious for a long time, I would eye roll when I hear that topic. And so, what is the hospitable invitation to someone when thinking about race? And we're going to be talking about theology, bringing action in the world. How do we bring up that core justice issue at the heart of America in a way that allows 21-year-old Tripp to do it? It took a lot of patience. If that makes sense. Yeah,
I think, part of it for me is that I'm not always super concerned with people being uncomfortable because, honestly, people are dying, right? So there's part of me that, feels okay, if you feel uncomfortable, if you need to cry, or these parts of, the learning process, and that's okay. But you need to learn how to do those. And that's part of the process of grappling with, what Robin DiAngelo calls white fragility, the fact that we, as white people, haven't learned how to talk about race very well. And so we need to learn how to be resilient in those conversations. And I think that's part of the hospitable, aspect of it is helping people learn how to be resilient in conversations like that. And also to own the fact that they will have reactions that, are failures, right? That everyone who does race work, everyone who does this kind of theology is going to screw up at some time. And to be able to stand in that failure with some humility and learn from it and say, you're right, I screwed that up. Now let's try and do it differently. Mm-hmm. That's a huge part of learning how to do race work from a compassion basis, I think, for white people in particular.
Yeah, and I remember a moment where one of in the interfaith ministerial group in Winston-Salem, and we did racism training together because Winston-Salem in North Carolina is still a very segregated city by an interstate. And there are two minister groups. You could be interfaith, but not interraced very often. Mm-hmm. And I remember when we did the kind of anti-racism training, one of the elderly statesmen of the Black Church in Winston-Salem, after just saying, being extremely patient and loving, he said, "It's okay, Reverend Fuller, you're white, but overcoming." And it was funny. And then I thought, no, you know what? It does it. It gives me freedom to be a complete idiot and then try to figure it out and move towards grace. And so we started talking about it. And then we sat down when I was moving. And I remember saying, like, I have no idea how this is going to work when I'm in California. Because when I visited, even like sitting in on a class reading James Cone when I visited Claremont was nothing like reading James Cone in North Carolina. And he said, well, just remember the first encounter with grace when it comes to your privilege is guilt. Don't run away from it. And I'm not even still sure exactly what that means, but I was like, if you tweeted back then, I would have tweeted it. And it's been a helpful reflection. And that's why when Scott was like, I want all of us to talk about theology and action and the relationship of theology and worship, that is like theoretically what we all do in theological education. We would hope, like, in the output, we come to own our convictions and it leads to beautiful, justice-centered lives in the world. But that doesn't always happen. Because once we start to go to that action and embodiment, lots of toes get stepped on. And when we were talking before, Scott had mentioned a number of issues in particular that across the denominations here and things where we begin to talk about it, like how does the Black Lives Matter movement affect churches? How does that get heard differently in Berkeley, in Iowa, and in Atlanta? So like how do we advise to bring these things that are sitting there on our plates as ministers that we need to wrestle with? What's the theological wisdom to using them as opportunities to grow in grace, wisdom, and justice?
Valerie can speak to that immediately.
This is a generic softball for whoever wants to say anything.
I think that, well, first of all, everyone is not dealing with it the same. That's why we have what might be startling for us, the number of people that actually are keeping so wide of a margin of someone like Trump as a bona fide contender. So there are those that are not experiencing guilt. They're not acknowledging any culpability about or responsibility about considering, all of us as one family of God. And the very fact that the constant retort to Black Lives Matter was all lives matter, says that there are those that wish these voices of social justice and conscience would just all go away. So I think what you have to do when you're in different parts of the United States, different audiences, you have to know how to read the room. And you meet them where they are.
So hermeneutics is more than just biblical.
Yes.
One of the things I found that even in reading all the people that are participating in tonight's faculty pages is yours was clear. And then I saw that she'd worked in business, which made perfect sense. Why you would tell someone what you believe, why you believe it, and what you were planning to do. And I thought to myself, how many, when I read it, I thought, I'm going to have to borrow that and put it on my bio page. Like, you're committed to train spiritual change agents who dare to be contextually creative and prophetically transformative. I was like, wow, that sounds like mainline Protestants would have had to workshop that for their mission statement for a year and a half and forgot it the next week. And so I'm sitting there thinking, so having worked in business and in leadership and then turning to an institution, the academy and the church, which glory days didn't even like have a 19 in front of it. It's okay, all you Episcopals, y'all have been keeping the 17th century alive for a while.
And proudly, Tripp, proudly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's very common. So can you say, like, what does that sensitivity to, right, like creating humans that are ministers who are spiritually sensitive to both their context in doing it creative, but also being prophetically transformative? Because like in those different locations we were talking about it, that looks very different. Like right now, people listening to this in Berkeley on the other side of town who aren't here are like, that's not even edgy. I don't know what they're talking about. But in Iowa, they're like, those are the liberal Christians that still even use Jesus. I don't even know what they're saying. And we're all in the same country. And then there's actually other countries, I've heard.
I do hear that.
Yeah, I know. So can you give us some of that wisdom of like thinking both creatively and culturally, but also figuring out how to remain prophetically challenging in the different contexts you're in?
Well, I'll use my class as an example because we dealt with this and we deal with this in different classes. In fact, right now I'm teaching a class, Morality and Society, and we're going to be talking about what's moral, what's ethical, what's right, what's wrong, and to whom. And helping people to understand that their experiences, their embedded context, might inform some prejudices that might be uncomfortable to come to a self-reflected acknowledgement that they have. And as Scott said, it requires getting uncomfortable sometimes. So I fully prepare in whatever setting I'm in when we start this dialogue for people to resist and to get a bit angry. But I'm used to being radical like that.
Yeah, well, that was said with the kind of confidence that I completely believe you. So one of the things that we had talked about, Scott and I, when we were talking about this conversation, was like even thinking about how in different religious traditions, like the liturgical movements, the life of worship, the sacraments, and those type of things play different roles. But one of the things that holds together this kind of prophetic heartbeat of all the schools at the GTU, and it's connected even in Scott's book, More Than Communion, that like we aren't just doing the rituals, like those exist, like the broken body of the homeless dead Jew that God's like, you can't keep this junk down, crosses don't win, watch this out. Like that is at the heart of the expression of each tradition that's at the GTU. How is it that in a school like this, where you're taking the time to know your ecumenical peers, right? You're taking the time to even learn and think with people of other faiths who are moved by this love and justice-centered movement towards the other. Like, what is it like to then sit long enough in their particular tradition to see where the resistance is? Like, so if you're thinking of each of your traditions and the worship and liturgy and things that are there, if you were to like point out, this is the bubble we need to pop so that more liberation can move into this space, like where would you start to see that?
I think you have to talk to the people who are there, right? That the movements of resistance come from not the people who are sitting at this table necessarily. That the ways that people are resisting, both for positive and negative ways, is how we attend to those resistances. It doesn't necessarily, I don't think we can predict it without listening to the people who are there and what they're telling us. I think that if you look at, I think that's one of the things that the Black Lives Matter movement is actually doing really well, is listening to the resistances that are coming at them around tactics, around things that are happening, and either deciding to change or not because they're getting resistance, right? And I think that's part of the process of that faith communities can go through too, is listening to where the resistances are and learning from them in that context, instead of trying to predict or show like where this should happen or might happen.
There are some things I think though too that we can do as a theological guild to aid that process a little bit. And one of the things that I find particularly compelling along those lines is, or an easy thing that would be to do, when we talked about building this particular conversation, one of the things we talked about was socially engaged theology. How do we talk about socially engaged theology? Well, sometimes I believe that talking about socially engaged theology itself is part of the problem. in that you've already said there's something called socially engaged theology. It's the same way that we talk as if there's something called socially disengaged theology, and I don't even know what that would be.
I thought that was catechism.
So, like, what would that even be? It's the same way that we talk about contextual theology as if there's non-contextual theology. So, and I think that there's a way in which, as a guild, when we splinter out theologies that are socially engaged and hold them up for special observation, they're automatically put in some kind of a special category. But all of the theology that we teach should be socially engaged, or I would argue that its relevance is imperiled. And so even if we're talking about socially engaged theology, stopping using that language, even though I suggested it, that was one of the things that, as a way of focusing the conversation, eventually I would like to see a guild that doesn't talk about socially engaged theology any more than it talks about contextualized theology, just because it has internalized and is organized in such a way that everything it does as a discipline is contextualized and socially engaged. And that would go a long way to reducing some of the resistance that we feel. Because if we're training people in theological disciplines and we're training clergy without compartmentalizing in that way, then it's already built into a certain kind of perspective or imagination of what we're up to as disciples.
Well, and I think that all theology, like you're saying, all theology already is socially engaged. And so part of what we are able to do is to think about what the social implications are of the theologies we already do. And I think that was part of the beautiful aspect, I think, of the vigil we did against Islamophobia at the GTU right before the break, is that it allowed every community that was part of Holy Hill to come and offer from their own tradition their impetus for resisting Islamophobia. So each one of those traditions was saying, this is what my tradition tells me, this is what my theology tells me about being engaged in this social movement against Islamophobia, from the prayer book to Vatican documents to, you name it. That was part of the conversation.
And I remember watching some of the footage out of the Black Lives Matter protests in the wake of Ferguson very, very soon after those protests began, and listening to the chants, show me what theology looks like, this is what theology looks like, show me what theology looks like, this is what theology looks like. They were not saying this is what socially engaged theology looks like. They were not saying this is what contextualized theology looks like. And they're right. They're right. The signs that were held up that said James Cone was right didn't say that James Cone was right in James Cone's context, or James Cone was right because James Cone was socially engaged. Saying James Cone was right because James Cone is a theologian and has something to say.
I think also, if we're really going to be cutting edge in teaching our students about being in the real world with all the complexities, we have to start popping some balloons, bursting some bubbles. One is that we don't live in a post-racial society. The other is that we don't have a colorblind America. And the other thing we need to stop doing is hallmarkicizing Jesus.
I say that one again.
Okay. We put Jesus on a Hallmark card: the little lamb, the lily of the valley, the victimized one. And Jesus was hecka radical.
Yeah.
He was subversive and he challenged systems. So how can we go around kumbayaing with a candle and not challenging unjust systems?
It's one of those questions that once it makes sense, it makes perfect sense. And the first time it makes sense, it just freaks you out. And one of the regular responses I get from people at the podcast is, what do you do, for your spiritual life and your piety and your spiritual practices, when all of a sudden that theology and social change and practice are just not electives? They're kind of what Jesus was into. And if you've grown up and you love the story of Jesus You know the parables. You could probably outquote most progressive Christian theologians when it comes to Bible drill. You just had no idea that the kingdom of God had something to do with our economic system and the ecological suicide of our current regime. When you discover that, then you go, what just happened? Yep. Right? So as people who've existed in this robust, justice-centered, passionate theology for a while, if you're sitting there with someone having those initial breakthroughs and they're like, oh my God, she was right. They don't do this at VBS. Like, who put the Arky is the bop shoe bop of, oh, I can't take this one home. The people panic, they're like, how would you invite them not to have that figuring out new identity anxiety in their spiritual life, but like, here are some practices and tools to start to energize a deep, robust, prophetic faith?
Yeah. I thought you were winding down, Tripp. I'm sorry. But we're going to have to move on in just a moment.
Go ahead.
One resource that I recommend, one book, since you love books, is Opie Hendricks' Politics of Jesus. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I love that book, and I even use it as part of my Bible study classes with my church, is to really help the parables come alive, because the parables have a lot of double entendres. Mm-hmm. And so to help them understand what he said, what he meant when he said what he said, and what is the meaning for us today? Yeah. It gets to be pretty exciting.
Oh, yeah. Those parables are like Trojan horses.
Yeah.
They ruin your retirement plan.
I think we're going to have to move to the next panel.
Oh, wow. You start
I'm
getting
sorry.
Excited.
I'm here to be your killjoy, Tripp.
Yeah,
sorry.
you killjoy. You're just like, oh no, they're going to talk about prayer and piety and spiritual practices.
Sorry.
This is a seminary. What do they think the cemetery of theological education is?
I know.
But now, clearly you're going to put your hands together because the theological aristocracy is about to come up. Paul, Mark, and Arthur are heading up.
Let me start. I'm Paul Martin, and I'm the president of the American Baptist Seminary of the West and professor of pastoral theology. And the last movie that made me shed tears was Straight Outta Compton. And it did because I pastored in Compton for 23 years.
You did?
During the period of time that most of those guys were little tykes. And to see that segment come alive just brought tears to my eyes.
Mm-hmm. That was a powerful movie.
Yeah, it was. It is.
And some of us remember all the music.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Mark Richardson, Dean and President of Church Divinity School of the Pacific. And we have more people in the room. I like that.
You got your peeps.
You might just intimidate them more. You never know.
I can't. I don't grade their papers. No, I was trying to think, I can't even remember a movie that made me cry, because probably all of them do. My wife wants to go to romances, and I'm crying because I didn't get to go to the movie I wanted to go see. So I really don't have anything to say about that.
We won't tell it.
That was good. I'm Arthur Holder. I'm the Dean of the Graduate Theological Union. I also teach Christian spirituality when I'm not in those meetings that Tripp was talking about. And I'm a historian, so I can't think backwards to the last one. I had to start at the first one. So I started with Bambi, and I've been working my way up. And I got as far as Tender Mercies. I don't know if some of you remember that, but it has country music, broken lives, and a dead child.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so.
Just one person clapping. Yeah. Are you allowed to clap for dead kids? I don't know what to do. He's in charge of the GTU, but how are you going to take that? So Arthur, so you actually love Latin.
Yeah, Latin's great.
So like I'm dyslexic and failed 4 foreign languages trying to pass high school. And I did Latin over the summer twice at half speed so that I could graduate. And when I found out you translated the classics of Christian spirituality, I thought to myself, you know, it would be like double postmodern for you to tell us one classic Christian spiritual text in Latin that can even get play today. So like if you're sitting there and someone's like, I don't want to do that Latin classical spiritual stuff, all that old things, it's all like depressing spirituality, and you're like, you got to read this. Like, what are you sliding across the table, and what question are you sending them into that classic with?
Well, that's too easy.
Obviously, because everyone else already thought of theirs.
Yeah. Because I bet half the people in the room thought of Augustine's Confessions. Because where else do you get that kind of honesty and self-deception in Latin at the same time?
Now, I hope you do tweet that. Like, when the guy in charge of GTU drops a hilarious nerd joke like that, then you tweet it and you hashtag nerd out with your geek out. Hashtag MDiv and you'll understand. Oh. Anyway, Mark, you were part of the Science and Spirituality Quest project with Philip Clayton, who, until he finally gives me approval on the last edition of my dissertation, is my favorite person. Now, I have a question. Because it involved lots of interviews with scientists about spirituality, but it actually was more than 100 pages. Where did you find those scientists? Because I thought...
Where did we find them? We found them through... It was a networking of friends who were already in the sciences. These were people who were Nobel level. They were very productive in their fields. And I have another story to tell. The more interesting piece to me is, why did they say yes and come to the conversation? Because we know the allergy between sciences and the university and theology. But when we sent out the invitations to these people, 80% probably said yes and 20% no. I thought it'd be about the reverse, and we just build up from there. And I think the reason why is they have they had tenure, so they didn't have to worry about the conversation. But I think I
support getting tenure.
I think they had no other context for having these conversations. They'd read each other's papers and journals, but had never had this kind of conversation about theory in their domain and assumptions which hold in their spiritual path, how they come together.
So would you say it's also reverse? Like, what do you think the percentage response would be if you asked ministers to show up and talk about spirituality and science?
I don't think they'd show up.
Because I said that just thinking.
That's got to be fixed.
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, like that whole God is creator thing probably begs the question. Your science should leave the 17th century.
Well, the silence is palpable, and I think the reason why is it's a dangerous question. It feels dangerous because of the way that we've set up that conversation.
So what do you think, when you're thinking of faith communities wrestling with dangerous questions, one of which is science? What's the role of your students when they're going to lead communities, especially ones that determine your family's health insurance? How you bring up dangerous questions that are also essential to discipleship today?
Yeah, well, I think to start with is to realize our finitude and that we could be wrong about something, but it's not God that's at stake. It's our ideas about God, and transformation is what we're about. So that's a starting point.
So you're saying God's not insecure about us?
I don't know about that. But the other piece of this is that Oh, you got me thrown off, Tripp. I was at a point and I just completely blew it. It's up
You
to
see,
you.
people don't interrupt you during meetings.
But isn't that the challenge of theology today, is to prepare our communities to deal with the issues that affect them most deeply? Mm-hmm. You know, you're talking about Black Lives Matter as all life matters. The question that I raise as one who is engaged in theology is, how do we prepare people to meet the challenges theologically? Because when we look at God's word and interpret it in the past as opposed to the present, there was more of an activist nature to the word that's disappearing today.
Yeah.
You just reminded me what I wanted to say.
Okay, I'm helping
Now,
you out.
you helped me out,
Okay.
Paul.
Wisdom,
Thank you.
light,
We work
touches
together here.
light. Bart, 4-1.
The science and religion conversation is an aspect of faith in public life, which is what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And it's fear about not just science, but it's fear across the board of public domain, civic life, that we have to get over if we're going to really have mission in the world.
Mm-hmm. So Arthur and Mark and Paul, you're sitting here, you're executives, and then the Baptist in the house has currently got a book, right? Decency and Order. In the subtitle, this just sounds dangerous if you hang out with those episcopally informed ecclesiologists. A biblical perspective of church administration. So after the 4 chapters on plenty of water and the chapter on no more church meetings and the chapter on casseroles, praise Jesus. Yeah. So tell me, like, in wrestling with Scripture, like today, in an ecumenical context, where Baptists aren't going to pull well, we're biblical Christians, go back to the church, you should just read it more, and dunk people and vote, type of thing. Both wrestling with your tradition and then in this ecumenical context, how do you understand decency and order, which I thought is what church meetings were not built for? Like Robert's Rules is the means to be passive aggressive and do what your dead grandmother wanted you to do at a church.
It's on you, man.
That was me talking till you cut in to talk about what you were going to say, because I was
you should have prepared me for this.
Oh, no, you've been preparing your whole life.
The theory simply is that because society is so out of sort, out of kilter, the culture itself, that if we're going to be intentional in terms of preparing people in the church for their outreach to a particular community, whatever the issue is, then there must be some kind of saneness to the church. And Christians who are mandated to be transformers by the Word of God cannot be subdued by the intentionality of a culture that has lost its mind. And the challenge that I see, because I pastored for 50 some years before I became, as you put it, an administrator, an executive.
A spiritually endowed wisdom reservoir of brilliance.
Right.
That sounds better.
That the challenge is that, you see, the difference between the church and the world is that there is order, quote unquote, and decency, quote unquote, in the perspective of God's presence. Now, to the degree that we can latch on to that and convert that in the same kind of way that I think the challenge presents itself today, because we are dealing with systemic racism. I mean, it's an embedded culture. Racism is a part of every aspect of the culture. And it has filtered into the church. And so the question I raise as a professor of pastoral theology is, am I preparing men and women in the courses that I teach for a culture that is so overwhelming, that even God cannot act.
That's powerful. What would you think is a leadership lesson that you've gained as individuals, both in the academy and in the church, that if you were able to share it with your students, they might be a little more wise to the occasional snake bit of a church? That's just a small minority of them that they run into. Like, what have you learned in leadership, having engaged in the academy and in the church, and then in like the leaders of lots of churches, that from that kind of higher perspective, you're like, this is a nugget, don't forget it?
What I was going to say is that the advice I would give to anyone who's moving into any kind of leadership, particularly church leadership, is to spend time in some 12-step meetings. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's where you learn what leadership in the church is supposed to be like. It's service, and it's in order to let the community be what it's there to be and to do what it's there to do, rather than to set the agenda or to be the leader in the sense of the person who's charting the direction. Yeah. And that's where the decency and order thing comes in. I mean, that's the beauty of 12-step meetings, is they're the most organized. They're more organized than Robert's Rules of Order. Mm-hmm. But it frees people up to bring their own experience and to share that together. So that's good.
I think what I would say about this is to have one story that you tell everyone, not one that you tell to your board of trustees, another to your faculty, and another to your students.
Oh, yeah.
Be truthful about where you are in all those contexts, and to model the skills of conversation that you want the students to come away from the school with. Skills of seeking truth as the intent of the conversation and not seeking power. And I think that gets back to the 12-step issue.
I got a phrase that I use in all of my life and in my ministry is that, and I see, and it is so painful me to see the rhetoric in the culture. And so I've coined this phrase, you've got to stop rapping and start mapping. Think about that. You've got to stop rapping. I mean, there's so much rhetoric that goes on in the life of the community and in ministry. The pontification that pastors practice on Sunday morning. And then you can't find them all week. That's the rapping part. The mapping, the mapping part takes a lot of more responsibility, energy, and vision. We've got to bring some resolve to the issues that we're confronted with in this culture. Mm-hmm. And I believe, because I'm Christian, I believe that those resolves come through the church, that the church that I love so dearly and is so ill today is the place that God wants transformation to occur for the community. So we got to stop rapping, get over this rhetorical kind of stuff, and begin mapping, strategizing for change.
I feel like there's like follow-up questions to each thing you said, and I'm used to hour-long conversations with individuals, so now I'm just going to have to get your email address and invite you back on. When Arthur, in your sermon earlier, you mentioned also, who also appreciates the synoptic parallel exegetical references in your sermon? When you leave seminary, your church members just don't appreciate it the same. And you're like, if you don't have a copy of the synoptic parallels that you'd use for your quiet time? And then they say, stop judging me. And then you're like, use the library. But in it, you also mentioned Edwin Friedman, and for those of us that are influenced by Alfred North Whitehead, Bowenian theory is very near and dear to our hearts. And one of the things I was thinking of, it popped in my head when you're saying it, one of his lines I loved about leadership is he said, criticism is a form of pursuit. And that if you see criticism or receive it as if the person's telling you what the real problem is, you aren't leading yourself or nobody. And y'all are leaders in theological institutions where the church is pretty sure they're not the problem and y'all are, and that the academy is pretty sure you're way too Christian, and that you need to figure out how to be a part of the intellectual institutions of the academy. And then there's all these changes in culture, economy, the shape of the church, and the economic model, the institutional models are all changing, and everyone's criticizing y'all. When Philip Clayton and I hosted this conversation thing for a Ford Foundation grant of like denominational leaders and school leaders, the only thing I thought after it is these people are more like spoken ill about than middle schoolers. And they hear compliments negatively. So if you're thinking in that model of like criticism is this form of pursuit, what is it that culture is criticizing the church for? What is it that the church is criticizing the institutions for? Like, what is the yearning deep down that all of this flux and transformations and new innovations is driving at? Do you have a sense about where the hope, the change, the movement's really going, as opposed to like the complaint list?
Yeah. Well, you started with referring to family systems theory, and I think that sets the framework for this. The criticism is if you look at it as what one party is picking up on with the other party, and then you start arguing about who's right and who's wrong. If you get sucked into that, it never ends. It goes on forever. And it takes somebody to stop. I mean, now we're kind of switching almost to Girardian theory, and take somebody to stop and say, okay, I can take your criticism. And I can live with it. And I may even come around to agree with some of it and be changed. You do that, and it throws a monkey wrench into the system of the blame exchange, and there's a possibility for something new to emerge from that. That's tough to do. It's tough to do as an individual, and I think what you're pointing to is it's tough for institutions to do that too, because we tend to project ourselves onto the institutions that we're a part of, and we take everything personally. And I think that's part of what the gospel is about, is to help us understand that it's not all about us. And then you can look at things. You can't be God, but you can try to look at things from God's point of view, and it does look differently, because then you see how it all fits together, or at least imagine that it fits together. Even if you can't see how it does, you think it must.
I think one of the things that you take on in leadership of an institution, whether it's a seminary or something else, but in the seminary context, people are anxious and they're really hungry for change in theological education. They're anxious about the church. They think that the seminaries may not have served the church very well in terms of educating clergy for leadership. When you're in this position that we're in, you're not in a situation like tacking a sailboat. It's more like changing the direction of a ship. And, you start at one point and a half hour later you've changed a few degrees and that's about it. So you're making choices that take a long time to see outward where the effects are going to be. We're just going through a curricular revision on our campus. And I'm sure that it will take years to see some of the impacts, some of the outcomes of that in terms of what we want to see for emotional and spiritual development toward leadership to take place in the formation program, just to use an example. It will take time for the church to experience the transitions we would like to see happen. It's not going to be a tacking of a sailboat.
A lot of our concentration, too, has been on survival. since 2008, the same conditions that affected the lifestyle of community has challenged theological education in a way that we've never been challenged before, I understand. And so a lot of our energy has been directed in what I call a survival mode. You know, we are charged with the responsibilities of the traditional educational process that we find in theological education historically, while being confronted with how do we finance, how do we operate in a declining society, in a declining financial society. And so that has caused a lot of problems for the theological presence. Seminaries that have long-standing history in terms of educating people for ministry, all of a sudden can't pay the bills, have to reduce staff, have to sell property, have to find a new way to do this theological thing. And the GTU, you know, for the last several years, we've had those questions posed over and over again. How do we provide the leadership that our churches want when we are dealing with new issues that aren't theologically based? You know, so, you know, and for one who has not been associated with theological education as I am now and have been for the last few years, you know, it has been very challenging, because some of my brothers and sisters who are my comrades, who have presidential responsibility or leadership responsibility, have a longer history than I do. But it becomes very practical to me as a method of survival to say, you know, we need to do something about changing. In fact, the prediction is that by 34, 35, theological education will not be the same. You know, that's a prediction that, you know, if we're in the business of providing an education where men and women can be ordained to Christian ministry, and that's what that Masters of Divinity program. And yet, I think Arthur said it, or someone said it today, that you know, you go through 3 or 4 years of preparing yourself for ministry, and there's no place to minister. Churches aren't calling them. You know, they can't get jobs beyond the masters. So these are the issues that make a new formation for theological education and leadership development and challenges. Yeah. You know, and at ABSW, we're struggling with that. And, you know, we're very proud of the outcome, because we're very happy about what we see happening with some of our graduates. But it's really a challenge.
So the last question, if you did not have to go to meetings, and all of a sudden the Holy Spirit showed up and said, what seminar, if I magically had the appropriate number of people sign up so that it made, would you want to teach? Like, if you got to skip talking to donors and alumni with issues, and that first year student who's pretty sure you hate them, even though this is the first time you've met them. And the Holy Spirit's like, look, you've done a great job, but what I need you to do is to nerd out and teach your favorite seminar you've ever got to teach, and magically all your favorite students are going to sign up for it. Which one is it you're going to teach? You're more than welcome to give a reading list to it, but what would happen if you lapsed back in?
Well, I never stopped. I still teach at least one of those every year, and the favorite thing that I've taught is a course on the Song of Songs, in through the history of Christian interpretation of the Song of Songs, and there's a lot of Latin involved, and also there's Greek and other things as well. So you love that. But to see the opportunity to grapple with the way in which Christian translators and interpreters through the years have dealt with this. This is the one book of the Bible that does not mention God, and yet it has become the text that is the greatest inspiration of mystical prayer and of spirituality. So you have that wonderful paradox that's there, and I'm going to do that because this is my last year as dean, so I'm going to be doing that more often now. Right. Yeah,
well, I would say I was excited, but I wouldn't know if that's appropriate.
If you can do it spiritually.
Late 19th and early 20th century theological responses to evolution.
Wow.
Y'all should really talk him into that.
Extemporaneous preaching.
If you could make mainline Protestants show up and do it, that would just be like, it could be a new reality TV show.
You can roll in my house.
And it'd be hilarious. Like 12 minutes in, you're like, you got 30 more. Oh, did you know you're allowed to exegete the text?
Don't forget I'm Baptist now.
I know. All right, so everyone give the most wise leaders you have a hand, and remember to pray for them. This is a difficult job to do. And welcome Carol and Jay. We are going to play a game in just a minute. Before we start this, whoever was in the bathroom with me that asked, there's a flyer thing that I had up there about an event Philip Clayton and I are doing in Los Angeles the first week of March called Unfolding Theology. It is a constructive theology interactive event with Keith Ward from Oxford and such, Cynthia Rigsby, Adam Clark, and Amish Young, which is about as theologically diverse as people get. And it's an interactive with a coloring book constructive theology event. And since I'm in charge of it, I have like 4 or 5 spaces for people that will sit with ministers and do the discussion time and pretend you're informed. So if you want to be one of those people and make the trip down to LA and hang out with us, there's also a beer tour. There's a interactive history of the church theology game with cardboard cutouts of theologian faces. And there's theological speed dating at the end.
Oh, nice.
Where the theologians have to convince you that their school of constructive theology will answer the questions that plague your life.
For sure.
I mean, and the whole thing's streaming online for free. If you don't want to come to Los Angeles, you can sign up on Unfolding Theology, then you can live stream it, and we're going to do a whole bunch of like book giveaways if you give like the snarkiest tweet. That was what the flyer thing was for. And if you are like, I'm a student, I don't have any money, but I would come and pretend I know what y'all are talking about while ministers ask questions, then Jesus is calling you to come. All right.
There you go.
All right. So, now, here's our cards. You're gonna pick some too.
Should they introduce themselves?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna explain the game first.
Right, sorry.
Yeah. Pay attention. I love talking down to myself. It's very 90s angst.
I'm trying to see the questions, but I can't.
Reality Bites references.
I know.
3 people got the Reality Bites reference. Lisa Loeb. We should have sang that song. Anyway, this game is called Au Contraire, Mon Frere. And why don't you all say it?
Au contraire, mon frere.
Now say it like you mean it.
Au contraire, mon frere.
Now say it like you had 3 more drinks. Freedom fries. So Au Contraire, Mon Frere is a very fun game, especially with tenured theology professors, because it's a game where you have to take the opinion opposite of the previous person who talked. And you may be saying to yourself, in this 90-second game of interactive theological debate. Do I have to even know what I'm talking about? No. You just have to convince us you do, and or be funny. So, for example, if the statement was something like, the world's greatest intergalactic theologian is Chewbacca the Wookiee, you would say, yeah, clearly Chewbacca is the world's greatest theologian. If you had ears to hear, you would know that the correct interpretation of the Trinity is, and then we'd be like, that was awesome. I totally heard the perichoresis and that junk. And then the other person, with straight face in 90 seconds, have to explain why Chewbacca is not the world's greatest intergalactic theologian. And they may suggest an alternative or demonstrate all the hate they have towards super hairy, large creatures.
We are definitely.
And then at the end, you will vote for which of your theologians, au contraire de monde awesome, the best. And they don't know what they're about to have to do. All the questions that we say that seem inappropriate are Scott's.
Yes.
The safe, tame ones are Tripp and Tripp's. T squared. When we bring 4 P's together, you may as well throw a theological pod on it. Anyway, so au contraire mon frère, you'll get the category, and then you'll have to pick one side, argue it. The other one has to argue the other side. So you may or may not have to defend theological statements, figures, and ideas that you completely detest. So do it with gusto and charm, and or threaten people that you're giving grades to this semester so that they can vote for you.
I don't agree.
And that's how it goes. So our contestants, Tripp.
Yes.
Are Carol, tell us your name, school, position, and that tear-jerking film you encountered.
I'm Carol Jacobson. I'm Associate Professor of Practical Theology at PLTS here in Berkeley. And the last movie I saw that brought a tear to my eye, I used it in class 2 weeks ago, Romero.
Oh, that's a good one. And you even forget that the dude was in Adam's Family.
I remember.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
I forget. But you cried knowing he was in Adam's Family.
I loved that movie.
Adam's Family was an excellent movie.
It was. It was an excellent TV series, too. And I'm
Yeah.
old enough to have watched it, like, when it was on.
Wow.
Da-da-da-da. All right, Jay. Da-da-da-da.
Yes. So my name is Jay Johnson. I'm Assistant Professor of Theology and Culture at Pacific School of Religion and on the core doctoral faculty here at the GTU in the theology area. And the most recent movie that made me cry is a movie that I watch every year during the holidays, which is The Princess Bride.
Oh, nice.
That's right. You and Ted Cruz.
Yeah. But for different reasons.
No, Jay, I got a phone call just a minute ago from Iowa, and they were like, is this the Jay Johnson who wrote Peculiar Faith, Queer Theology for Christian Witness? And they were thinking that you might, in 30 seconds, tell me what in the world queer theory is and why it's theological.
Oh, yes. It's obvious.
I know, but not... Well, remember, Iowa is not quite the same as Berkeley.
Because queer, the queer in queer theory does not mean, it's not a synonym for LGBT. Rather, it is about resisting and not fitting into the categories and classification schemes of normality of the modern West, whether it has to do with race, gender, sexuality, class, economics. And that's exactly what Jesus did in the first century in his socio-political context. To be queer is to be Christian.
I feel like someone just got like 5 nerd points. Iowa called and said, my bad.
Hold on, I gotta tweet that.
All right, you do that because I'm gonna ask Carol a question. Carol, I was distracted by you writing about prolepsis and open theism, but I wasn't going to ask you about that unless we had an hour and a half because it might get me excited. But you also wrote on actually teaching the Bible to children, and it made me think to myself, if you babysat for me, and we're doing your favorite Bible story with my 8-year-old son, and weren't going to do how Deborah is the most successful general in the Bible, which is half of our bedtime Bible stories, which one would you do?
8 years old?
Yeah.
I might freak him out about how the bears come and eat the prophets.
Yes!
A little nighttime reading there.
Yeah, how many people remember that story? See, at a Divinity School, hands get raised for that. They're like, if you ask Jesus in your maybe. So, like, where Elijah gets called, like, bald head.
Yeah.
And then he's just like, clearly, if teenagers make fun of you, the only appropriate thing to do with your lack of follicles is to call out the she-bears.
That's right. That's right.
And 42 ewes were mauled that day. That's the story you tell right about 1:30 a.m. when you're having that, romping for Jesus lock-in. You were like, yeah, so a prophet was going up the hill, and these teenagers are like, I don't want to go to sleep, and I don't want to sleep unless I'm in the sleeping bag of that fine person over there. And you're like, well, Elijah was like, watch out, she-bears. And they were like, well, I guess I'm going to go to sleep and pray. When I was in college, they had a battle of the bands at school. My roommate and I, we did a concept metal band, and entered, and it was called Wrath of Bear. And it was like a theodramatic account of that story, but with like really bad imitation corn riffs. She bears down and don't call him bald down. Across your face, kid. That's how it went.
Really?
Yeah, we did not win. Somehow the Bible thumpers were not excited about it. And that was called Vamping for No Reason.
Yeah, I was going to say. Did we have to get somewhere, or are we all good?
So we're going to play a game called Au Contraire, mon frere.
Oh, God.
What up?
I love you, too.
Yeah, really nervous.
All right, you're first.
Really nervous.
Yeah. And Carol's going first.
Oh,
because she brought up the she-bear reference.
Yeah, no, that was epic. So, because that was epic and we were talking about Scripture, here is your category. The most epic epistle, and from which you get to choose Romans or 2 John.
And you get 90 seconds and go.
Oh, it's not funny, but as a Lutheran, I got to say Romans, right? I mean, Romans is the most epic epistle. It changed the church. It got us out of the Catholic Church, got us out of the whole bowing and scraping thing. And we were justified by grace and not by what we did, not by how much money we paid and none of that stuff. We got a direct pipeline to God. It changed everything, really. So I say Romans, the most epic epistle, and I'm sticking with it.
Well, that's interesting, Carol. Because, Jay, and remember your first line is au contraire. It would like to tell you how 2 John, which he clearly is going to demonstrate biblical awareness to you,
good luck there, Jay.
is the most epic epistle.
Au contraire, ma soeur.
Merci beaucoup.
No. Romans is not the most epic epistle, and clearly because 2 John is all about love. It's like every other word is love in that particular epistle. Who can be against love? Love is all you need. What's the meaning of love? Love is right there it's like through the entire epistle. How could you be more epic than that? The Beatles used it for their songs, right? And then when you go, when there's a gay pride parade, if there's a big march and stuff, and you see these little porta potties everywhere, the name of the letter's on the side of the bathroom. It's John's everywhere. 2 John.
All
right. It is clearly Romans. Rome fell. Hello, the Roman Empire fell.
All right? That's time.
That's time.
So, how many people really, really love Romans?
Thank you. Let's impress.
And 2 John, the most epic epistle.
All right.
All right, next. The early church father who brings the freaking heat. Jay, you're going to go first.
Oh, shit.
Your options are Origen or Tertullian.
Oh, this is so easy. Origen rocks the world, except for the little castration part, but we won't go there. So the
That's a
thing
very
that's
hard
really
aside.
great about Origen is that he believed that the Song of Songs, Arthur Holder, was the very key to the entire story of Christian faith. Is that right, Stephen Quarles, my doctoral student who's in my class this morning? Yes? Thank you. Origen believed basically that the universe is about sex. There's
You got
nothing more
10
to say.
seconds, but
There's nothing more to
you don't
say.
want to climax early.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Au contraire, mon frère. No, the reason, Tertullian brings the fire. Tertullian brings the word. We have ignored this word. Now, Tertullian knew that a man was a man and a woman was a woman and that women were no good. Now, if we had paid attention to that way back then, we would not be having all this problem in the church and problem in the society. We wouldn't be having the culture wars and the sex wars and all that stuff. Women would be property. Men would be in charge. It would be beautiful. There wouldn't be any conflict. It'd be a life together.
Well, who's going to go for castration Origen?
Yeah!
But the doctoral student said yes.
Yes, thank you. An A.
And who was just thinking there's no more pure heat than Tertullians?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was hilarious.
That was awesome. I'm convicted.
Oh,
The medieval mystic with the mostest.
Wait, say this
The
again.
medieval mystic with the mostest. Richard of St. Victor's dazzling darkness. Or Hildegard von Bingen's notion of universal health.
Who goes first?
That would be you.
Oh, thank God.
Let's see. I wrote about Hugh of St. Victor, but I didn't like him, so I guess I'm going to have to pick Hildegard. Best medieval mystic of all time. Why? Because she hated Tertullian. She said, no way. Women can think about God. Women can write theology about God. And by the way, I am a musician. I sing well. I write well. I communicate well. I do not have to be property. I am not the second order of creation. Indeed, I am the first, and God likes me best.
Who's the other one?
Hugh of St. Victor, I think. Richard of St. Victor.
Well, I
got nothing
She
to
didn't
say.
even have to say universal health to communicate it.
Yeah.
But if you're wondering who is it that can capture the dazzling darkness of Richard of St. Victor, and he was reading him just last night.
In the dark. It is so obvious that Richard of St. Victrola, Victor, was it?
Victor.
His dazzling darkness outshines Hildegard in every respect. First of all, have you ever tried to sing Hildegardian music? I don't think so, unless you're doing a little bit of doobie on the side, then you can do that. Anna, do I get an amen for that? So, right, here we go. Dazzling darkness, hello, Pink Floyd. This is what we're talking about. Okay. So if you want to really bring Christianity into the 21st century, unless the Lutheran wants to stay back in the 16th, right? Then we need Richard's dazzling darkness to shed light on our barbaric Philistine culture.
Wasn't he from the 14th century?
All right, who has had their darkness dazzled by Richard, and who is enjoying Hildegard's Tertullian hate?
All right.
All right. What is the most annoying straight white male theory of religious pluralism?
I'm ready.
Me too, man.
Either.
We don't get to pick, do
No,
we?
you don't get to pick.
Dang,
You got two
I already
options.
have one.
Ronner's Anonymous Christian or John Hicks, everyone's going up the same mountain.
Oh, that's to me, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it is.
Yes, it is.
You know, I love Ronner, but I'm going to have to pick the most annoying one is that everybody goes up the same mountain. All the religions are alike. We're all traveling up to God, and you do your thing and I do my thing, and it's beautiful, and God finds us. And I mean, where is the humanity in that? Where is the relationship in that? Where is anything except kind of you in that? So I vote that the most annoying one is about many paths up the same mountain. You know, when I was at Yosemite for the first time, I saw people and they were climbing up Half Dome, going this way. I drove a car and went out to Half Dome this way on a straight path. It was many paths up the same mountain, but one path was better.
Well, you know, everyone is completely excited to hear the queer theory explanation of how Anonymous Christian is just freaking amazing.
I thought it was supposed to be the most annoying.
Most annoying.
Most annoying.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Carl Ronner, the Anonymous Christian. Ever been through a desert with no name? Ever try to check out of a California hotel but can never leave? This is the most annoying doctrine ever promulgated by a theologian. First of all, he's a Jesuit. Hello. And what? So
This is the GTU.
Oh, that's right. So they're okay if they're teacher. But Anonymous Christian, are you kidding me? We need a God with a name. This is sort of like organizing around no identity. Let's get together for ambiguity. No, we need specificity. We need actual particularity. We need to know who our sex partners are. Random.
I'm convinced.
That's a closing argument that I was not expecting. But who
It's
agrees
the Song
with Jay?
of Songs. Arthur knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
It's the Song of Songs.
All right, so
The dude in the back is just very committed. Who agrees with Jay about Carl Ronner's amazing Anonymous Christian?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Who wants to join that Claremont alumni John Hick and hike all up that same mountain?
Yes, I am.
All right, so we have two more, so we can decide this tie. And you have yours, and you're. Let's see, Jay, you're next, so you can pick which question I'm going to ask you because I like both of them. The most should be Christian atheist economic philosopher.
The what?
The most should be Christian atheist economic philosopher. They should be a Christian, but they're an atheist economic philosopher. Or the most creative German reconfiguration of the God-world relationship. Well, he already gave one option, so that's no fun. So I feel like you're wanting to discuss the most creative German reconfiguration of the God-world relationship. And I'm real interested in whether or not you're more blown away by Moltmann's use of Zinzum or Pannenberg's ontological priority of the future.
This is so clearly Moltmann's night. And the reason for that is Moltmann's understanding of the Zim-Zum is actually the basis for Honda's redesign of the hybrid car. So the thing about alternative energy is that you need to be able to make a space, right, in the universe for movement without eating up fuel. This is known in ancient Talmudic culture as Zim-Zum. So Moltmann is actually trying really hard to bury this alternative fuel plan in his theology because he knows the petroleum companies are not going to like this shit at all. So he pretends it's about God. It's about hybrid cars so that you can make room you have to make room in the world to burn fuel without burning it. Oh my God, Zim Zoom. Moltmann, hands down.
Well, you know, Trinity in the Kingdom has never made so much sense to me. That's one option. But, Carol, why is Pannenberg's ontological priority of the future the most creative German contribution to the God-world relationship?
Right, Jay. What about the dinosaurs? I mean, I'm just saying, if you're going to be talking about the Zimzung and the gas and the hybrid cars, you don't even get dinosaurs in the kingdom unless God ontologically creates from the future and not the past. Because if God comes to earth as Jesus in whatever year that was, the dinosaurs are screwed before then. The rocks, the plants, we got nothing to drive these cars, Jay. We need Pannenberg and the ontological priority of the future in order to have our hybrid cars. And so his is clearly the one we need.
So, who votes for Tesla?
Oh, it was creative.
It was.
It was impressive. It was impressive. I just don't footnote that on your exam. And who wants to save the dinosaurs? All right.
These are Lutheran plants.
So we have a nice little tie here, and it's going to be settled. Tripp, the other Tripp. What is our final? Oh, I'm sorry, my friend, which we all forgot to say after the second time.
What? Tripp.
We forgot to use French after the second.
We did.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did.
I
can't speak for you people.
Nope. Carol was really nervous about coming up here. I just want you to know that.
It's
she was
clear.
terrified.
Like if she didn't know what was coming, what would she do? Somehow connect prolepsis and dinosaurs.
Yeah. I really have no idea what to do with that. Thank you, Jesus, for the T-Rex. Best personality inventory test to prepare you for the ministry is the Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram.
Who goes first?
Whose turn?
I think it's Jay's turn.
I think it is Jay's turn. No, Carol? Yeah, you're right.
No,
Jay went first. Because we had Zim Zoom. So it's Carol.
My choices are the Enneagram and the Myers-Briggs.
Yes, or maybe BuzzFeed's hair metal band.
And this is the best one?
Yes.
Oh, well, without a doubt, it's the Enneagram. Because of the Enneagram, there are no wrong numbers. There are no bad ways to be. And if you're a 4 or a 2 or a 7, it's okay. You have a wing. Actually, you have 2 wings. And you can fly. And you have a kind of counter personality that keeps the other in check. And it's really a perfect picture of ministry, because when you get that lady who wants to leave the church because of the carpet, you have to tell her that she's okay, but she needs to get more in touch with her wings and fly in a different way. And it's all about love and about nobody being wrong, which really is the way to survive in the parish, especially when they pay your salary.
I believe I can fly.
Oh, contraire, monsieur. Look, I became a minister and a theologian because I didn't have to do math. I don't need numbers, okay? No numbers. No numbers. I'm all about the letters and getting as many letters behind my name as possible. Because the more letters you have behind your name, the more in debt you are, and the less money you make in the world. So, what I really appreciate about the Myers-Briggs, it has been so insightful in my own ministry and my own teaching. For example, I'm an intransigent, narcoleptic, flatulent, jocular guy. And that has really helped me understand so much about the other disciples and apostles with whom I share ministry. And it's made me feel a lot better about being narcoleptic, because it helps me to really resonate well with biblical characters.
Oh, wow. Who loves the Enneagram?
That was lovely.
And who loves the narcoleptic Myers-Briggs?
All right, Jay.
We do.
All right, Tripp with 2 Ps.
Yeah, I know. Well, Tripp with 2 Ps.
What's
I commend your parents for
I know
that.
you're going to count.
Because
you know numbers.
I really don't.
I did too know the numbers.
Really?
I picked the Enneagram.
Oh. Carol actually won this game.
Wow, dang! I can't believe it.
Well, because
Actually, was fun.
it happens. Numbers occasionally win. So if you've all already clearly looked up the lyrics to Long December by Counting Crows, which you're getting your phone out right now, as you do that, I want to say, thank you for hanging out. People on the interwebs, people listening to it after it's been recorded and edited, and it seems like way more put together than it was. And all of you for hanging out here, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for hanging out with Homebrewed Christianity. And clearly, Jesus is filled up your heart, and you're going to get my book so I can give you all those 5 free classes, and my mom will feel better about my book sales. What was the other thing I was going to say?
I have no idea.
No, I remember. It was something about how December could occasionally get long. And the best way we could do it together is for us all to stand like this. And you need to have your phone in an appropriate place. And if you're on the stage, just notice that the lyrics are going to fly across like a video. And all right, here we go. Wish you would.